She walked in, holding his bracelet. My heart stopped. The truth hit me like a freight train. Was she still my wife? Or had I been living a lie? I never thought much about the stability of my marriage with Sarah. We met in college, got married right after, and settled into a comfortable rhythm. We had good jobs, a house we loved, and no real complaints. Life was simple and predictable, the kind of steady pace most people strive for. Of course, like any marriage, we had our rough patches, but nothing serious. Just the usual humdrum of work stress and small, passing frustrations. It wasn't until later that I noticed the first cracks in our perfect life. It started small. Sarah had always enjoyed going out with friends, but lately, it seemed like she was going out more than usual. She'd join coworkers for drinks after work or meet up with old friends for dinners that stretched late into the evening. I didn't mind at first. We both had our own social lives. But then it started to feel different. She'd come home later and later, always with some excuse that sounded a little off. Work was busy, she was catching up with a friend, or just needed some alone time. And then there were the changes. Subtle but unmistakable. The phone. She'd keep it on her at all times, always facing down, no matter where we were. I try not to think too much about it. But there was a distance I couldn't ignore. She wasn't the same Sarah anymore. The one who laughed easily and would cuddle up on the couch after a long day. Now, she was distracted, her mind always somewhere else. One evening, I decided to catch her off guard. I came home early from a meeting, thinking I could surprise her. She was sitting on the couch when I walked in, but there was a strange energy in the room. Her posture was tense, her phone quickly shoved away. When she looked at me, her smile was forced, like it didn't quite reach her eyes. Something wasn't right, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. As the days went by, the odd behavior continued. Sarah went out more often, using work as an excuse. It wasn't until I bumped into Jason, the tenant we had renting our side property, that I started to wonder if something more was going on. He was a young guy, early 20s, and always polite when I'd stop by. But there was something about the way he looked at Sarah when she'd come over. I couldn't shake the feeling. One afternoon, I returned home unexpectedly, and something seemed off. I noticed the lingering scent of cologne in the air. It wasn't mine, and it wasn't one I recognized. I tried to brush it off, but that gut feeling kept gnawing at me. When Sarah came home, she was a little too cheerful, a little too distracted. It was the first time I saw it, the shift in her demeanor. Later that evening, when she left to meet a friend, I couldn't shake the suspicion that had taken hold. Something wasn't adding up. This time I followed her. I shouldn't have followed her. I knew it was crossing a line, but my instincts were screaming at me, urging me to do something I'd never imagined I'd have to do. I had to know what was going on. I kept my distance, just enough so I wouldn't be noticed, but close enough to see where she was going. It was late when she left, wearing that same smile, the one she used when she wanted to reassure me, the one that now felt hollow. Her car turned down the familiar street, the one that led to the little cafe she'd often visit, and for a moment, I thought that maybe I was just overthinking things. Maybe she was just grabbing a late coffee with a friend. But as she parked outside, I noticed something I hadn't expected. Jason, the tenant, was there. My heart sank. I tried to keep my emotions in check as I watched them greet each other with that familiarity. Jason smiled too wide, and Sarah's laughter seemed a little too sincere. I couldn't hear their conversation, but the way they leaned toward each other, the way they spoke, made me feel like an outsider, like I was intruding on something private. I felt my chest tighten, but I kept watching, frozen in place. They sat down inside together. A small part of me told me to turn around, to leave before I saw anything I wouldn't be able to ignore. But I couldn't. I couldn't look away. I watched as they shared a dessert, their heads close, too close. Sarah's hand brushed Jason's, and he didn't pull away. They were too comfortable with each other. The rest of the evening was a blur. I drove around aimlessly, not knowing what to do with the storm of emotions raging inside me. I tried to convince myself that it was all just innocent, that it was nothing. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. By the time I got home, I was numb. Sarah was already there, sitting on the couch like nothing had happened. She greeted me like she always did, as if I hadn't just watched her with Jason, as if nothing had changed. I didn't confront her that night. I couldn't bring myself to. The words felt too heavy, like they might shatter everything in an instant. Instead, I let it sit, this uncomfortable knowledge between us. She had no idea I knew. but I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't pretend anymore. The next few days passed in a strange fog. It was like I was walking through my own life as if everything were happening around me, but I wasn't really part of it anymore. Sarah went about her usual routine: work, friends, long nights out, but the conversations we had felt forced. I'd ask her how her day was, and she'd tell me with the same practiced smile, the same rehearsed details. But in the back of my mind, all I could think about was what I'd seen. What was worse was the subtle shift in our home. The intimacy that had once been so natural, so effortless, was now a foreign concept. When she came home late, I would pretend everything was normal. I'd ask if she had a good time, and she'd nod, always a little too quickly, like she was trying to move past it. But I was watching. I noticed every small change, every little inconsistency. She would never tell me where she'd actually been, only that she was out with friends or had to stay late at work. The tension in the house grew thicker with each passing day. On a Friday night, Sarah decided to stay in. She said she was tired, which I knew was unusual for her. She always had plans. It was a strange sense of calm, almost too much so. We had dinner, and for a moment, I thought maybe everything was going to be okay again. She smiled at me, her eyes softening. I tried to forget what I had seen, tried to convince myself that maybe it was just a phase, that things would return to normal. But then came the moment that shattered the illusion. Around 10 p.m., as we were watching TV, Sarah's phone buzzed on the table beside her. She quickly reached for it, her hand shaking ever so slightly before she tucked it away out of sight. I pretended not to notice, but I couldn't stop my mind from racing. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She nodded, too quickly. "Yeah, just work stuff." I didn't push, but in my gut, something told me that whatever she was hiding wasn't just work. I let the night drag on, but my mind was elsewhere. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how little I knew about her lately. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing her, bit by bit, piece by piece, and that maybe I'd already lost her without even realizing it. The following day, I decided to take a walk. The kind of walk where you don't really know what you're looking for, but you hope that some fresh air will clear your mind. I tried to process everything, what I had seen, what I was starting to feel, and I tried to put it all in perspective. It was just a couple of interactions, right? I told myself I was being paranoid. It could be nothing. But deep down, I knew. As I walked around the block, I found myself thinking about Jason again. The way he looked at Sarah. The way she had laughed at something he said, just a little too easily. He was only a tenant, a kid who worked at a cafe, but somehow, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to him than just that. He had become a ghost in my life, lurking just on the periphery, but always present. Every time I went over to the rental property, I could feel his eyes on Sarah. It was subtle but undeniable. I didn't like it. When I came home, I found Sarah sitting in the kitchen, flipping through a magazine. She looked up when I walked in, smiling that same smile, the one that no longer felt real to me. "Hey, you okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I replied, though I wasn't. "Just needed some air." She nodded, then changed the subject quickly, asking if I wanted to help her with something for dinner. We fell into the usual rhythm, but I couldn't escape the nagging feeling that things weren't what they seemed. I found myself zoning out during our conversation, trying to recall everything about Jason, all those small interactions that now seemed so much more significant. Later that evening, I did something I hadn't expected to do. I picked up my phone and called the number of the rental property. Jason answered, his voice chipper and light. "Hey, Jason," I said, trying to keep my tone casual. "Just wanted to check in on the place. How's everything going?" He responded with his usual enthusiasm, telling me everything was fine. But I couldn't shake the sense that he was holding something back. There was an awkward pause on the line, and then he quickly followed up with, "Yeah, everything's great here. Thanks for checking in." "Of course," I said before hanging up. Something in his voice had felt off, and I couldn't help but wonder if he knew, if he could sense that I was getting closer to the truth. The next few days felt like I was living in a dream. Everything seemed normal on the surface, but there was an undercurrent of tension that I couldn't escape. I couldn't stop thinking about the call with Jason. His voice had been too casual, too eager to get off the phone. It felt like he was hiding something. It gnawed at me, and every time Sarah left the house, I found myself waiting for her to return, analyzing her every word and action, looking for any slip-up, any hint that I was right. Then came the day that almost made me lose my mind. It was a Wednesday. I was working from home, and Sarah had told me she'd be out for a meeting. It was a routine she'd followed for the past few weeks. Long days, late nights, always coming home a little too tired, a little too distant. That afternoon, I got a message on my phone from the rental property. It was a simple update from Jason, saying that everything was fine, but then came the unexpected part. "I think Sarah left something at the house last night," he texted. "She came by to pick up a few things, but forgot something on the kitchen counter." My heart stopped. It wasn't the message itself that rattled me. It was the implication. Sarah had been to the house without telling me. Alone. She hadn't mentioned it, but Jason clearly knew she had been there. I was left standing in my office, staring at my phone, the weight of the moment sinking in. Had she gone there on purpose? Was it just an innocent mistake? Or was I about to uncover something I couldn't ignore? I couldn't sit still. I told myself I was overthinking it, but deep down, I knew. Something was wrong. I tried to distract myself with work, but my mind kept drifting back to the message. I had to know. I had to confront this before it consumed me entirely. I quickly grabbed my keys and decided to go to the rental property. I needed to see the place, to see if there was any sign that something had happened between them. I couldn't believe what I was about to do. I wasn't sure what I'd find, but I couldn't stay in the dark anymore. When I got to the house, I parked across the street, trying to stay out of view. My pulse quickened as I approached the front door. I stood there for a moment, frozen, as I stared at the house. It was the same modest little place I'd visited a dozen times before, but now it felt different, foreign, like I didn't belong there. I wasn't sure what I was hoping to find, but I couldn't let the uncertainty continue. With a deep breath, I approached the front door. It wasn't locked. Jason had probably been in a rush when he'd sent me that text. I pushed it open quietly and stepped inside. The house smelled faintly of cleaning supplies, but there was also something else in the air. A smell I couldn't quite place. I tried to shake it off and focus, but the unease gnawed at me. I moved slowly through the house, my footsteps soft on the hardwood floors. The living room was just as it always had been, nothing out of the ordinary. I made my way to the kitchen, where I remembered Jason's message about Sarah leaving something behind. The counter was clear, but as I moved closer, I saw a small silver bracelet lying there. I recognized it immediately. It was Sarah's. I picked it up, holding it in my hand for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't some mistake. This wasn't just an innocent visit. She had been here. And that bracelet? That was no accident. It was too personal, too intimate. As I turned the bracelet over in my hand, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway outside made me freeze. I quickly dropped the bracelet back onto the counter and stood motionless, hoping whoever it was wouldn't notice me. The door opened, and there was Jason, stepping inside with a bag of groceries. He didn't seem surprised to see me. In fact, he almost seemed relieved. "Hey," he said, his voice low, almost nervous. "I didn't expect you to be here." I tried to keep my voice steady as I replied. "I was just checking on the place. Sarah said she left something behind. Did you find anything?" Jason hesitated for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Yeah, she left her bracelet here. It's on the counter." My breath caught in my throat, but I forced myself to speak calmly. "She'll be glad to know you're taking good care of it." Jason just nodded again, looking at me with an odd, unreadable expression. It was like he wanted to say something, but he didn't. I couldn't stay there any longer. I had the confirmation I needed, even if it wasn't clear yet just how deep this went. I made my excuses, saying I had to leave. As I stepped back toward the door, Jason called out. "Take care, man," he said, almost too casually. I left without another word, my mind a whirlwind of anger and confusion. I couldn't stop the questions from flooding my mind. What was going on between them? How long had this been happening? And why hadn't Sarah told me? The drive home felt like an eternity. The world outside the car blurred, but my mind was racing with all the pieces I had just uncovered. The bracelet, Jason's casual demeanor, the unease that had settled deep within me. Every second, every mile, the knot in my stomach grew tighter. I was no longer in doubt. Something was happening. I had to confront Sarah. There was no more room for half answers or playing it cool. The truth had to come out, and I couldn't wait any longer. When I pulled into the driveway, her car was there. She was home. The house, which used to feel like our sanctuary, now felt like a cage. I didn't know how the conversation would go, what I would say, or even what I would do after I spoke the words. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't let this go on any longer. Sarah was on the couch when I entered, flipping through a book in that same way she always did when she wanted to seem busy or relaxed. She looked up and smiled when I walked in, but it wasn't the smile I was used to. It felt like a mask, something practiced, not real. "Hey," she said, trying to keep her voice light. "How was your day?" "Fine," I muttered, but I wasn't really there. I was already thinking ahead. I stopped by the rental house. The smile faltered for just a second, and I noticed it, even though she quickly recovered. "Oh yeah? Was everything okay?" "Jason said you left a bracelet behind," I replied, keeping my tone even, almost too calm. "I found it." Her eyes shifted briefly, and then she shrugged. "Oh yeah? I must have forgotten it last time I went over." Something about her response didn't sit right. Her casual tone didn't match the situation. I paused, letting the silence hang in the air. "Why didn't you tell me you went to the house?" I asked. "You've been there a lot lately, but you never mentioned it. What's going on, Sarah?" Her face tightened. For a moment, she didn't respond, her gaze darting away. Then, she muttered, "It wasn't a big deal. I just forgot the bracelet." I wasn't buying it. The excuse felt hollow, flimsy. The way she'd been acting, the way Jason had been around her, it was all adding up in a way I couldn't ignore anymore. "I saw the way Jason looks at you," I said, my voice firm now. "And I saw how you looked at him too. Don't lie to me. What's really going on between you two?" She went still. Her lips parted, but no words came out. For the first time, I saw the truth in her eyes, not guilt, but fear. I pressed, "Who is he to you, Sarah? What's going on?" Before she could answer, there was a knock at the door. I froze. The knock at the door shattered the fragile moment. I stood frozen, my heart racing. Who could that be at this hour? The timing couldn't have been worse. Just as Sarah's face went pale, her lips pressing together tightly, trying to hide whatever was happening behind her eyes. I watched her for a split second, wondering if she'd break. She didn't. "I'll get it," I said, trying to sound normal, though my voice had turned hoarse from the tension. I moved toward the door, trying not to show how shaken I was. When I opened it, I found Jason standing on the other side. His presence sent a chill down my spine. He was holding a package, which he immediately offered to me. "Hey, this came for you," he said, his voice too casual, almost too friendly. "Sarah asked me to drop it off." My gaze flickered back to Sarah, who was now standing behind me in the doorway, her face pale, but trying to act calm. She avoided my eyes, which made everything feel worse. She didn't even acknowledge Jason as he stood there, awkwardly shifting from one foot to the other. "Thanks," I muttered, taking the package from his hands. I wanted to slam the door in his face. I wanted to shout, but I didn't. I just stared at him, feeling the weight of everything hanging between us. Jason seemed to pick up on the tension. He shifted uneasily and cleared his throat. "Well, I'll just, leave you two to it. Take care." Without another word, he turned and walked down the steps. I slammed the door shut. The house felt suffocating. I stood there for a moment, the package still in my hands. Sarah hadn't moved. She was staring at the floor, and when I turned to face her, I could see the cracks in her composure. The act was slipping. "Sarah," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "What's going on? Why was he here? Why didn't you tell me the truth?" She swallowed, her lips trembling slightly as if she was on the verge of breaking down. She shook her head, but the words wouldn't come. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I waited, but she seemed lost in thought, unwilling to look me in the eye. Finally, she whispered, "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." My stomach twisted. "What do you mean? Did you ever plan to tell me? Or were you just going to keep pretending?" She opened her mouth, but before she could respond, the silence between us stretched painfully long. The silence between us felt suffocating. Sarah's face was a mixture of guilt and uncertainty. She didn't meet my gaze. I could feel the weight of everything she hadn't said pressing down on me. The words I'd been holding in for days were finally on the edge of my tongue, but I didn't want to explode. I didn't want to be the one who ruined everything with one moment of anger. Not yet, at least. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she repeated, her voice shaky. It was the first time she had spoken those words with any real emotion behind them, but they were empty. They didn't explain anything. They didn't fix what had already been broken. "You didn't mean for this to happen?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "What exactly is this, Sarah? What's going on between you and Jason? Because I know something is happening. Don't try to pretend like it's nothing." She flinched, as though my words stung more than I'd intended. It's complicated, she said, her voice barely audible. Complicated, I repeated, incredulous. You think this is complicated? You've been lying to me, sneaking around, and you think it's complicated? She shook her head, her eyes filled with regret, but also something else, something I couldn't quite place. She took a step toward me, her hand reaching out, but I stepped back, not wanting to let her touch me, not wanting to feel the hollow affection she was offering when it meant nothing anymore. I never meant for you to find out this way, she said. I never meant to hurt you, not like this. Don't, I interrupted. Don't act like this is just some mistake. You've been lying to me for months. You think I don't notice the way you've been acting? The way you look at him? Don't tell me this is just something that happened by accident. Her eyes filled with tears, but she quickly wiped them away. I didn't plan any of this, she said softly. It just happened. I don't even know when things started to change. I feel awful about it, but I didn't know how to stop. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to shout, to demand answers, to accuse her of everything that was running through my mind. But I couldn't. Not yet. There was still so much I didn't understand. Did you ever think about me? I asked, my voice thick with emotion. Did you ever think about how this would affect us? How it would tear everything apart? Sarah opened her mouth to say something, but the words faltered. She couldn't answer me. She didn't have an answer. I didn't know where to go from here, or what to do. I was still standing there, staring at her. My wife, the woman I thought I knew, the woman who had betrayed me in the worst possible way. And I didn't know if there was anything left to salvage. The silence dragged on, thick and suffocating. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, but no words came out. Sarah just stood there, looking like she was waiting for me to say something. Anything to make this moment less painful. But I couldn't. I didn't know how. She took a tentative step forward, like she was testing the waters, but I held my ground. I couldn't let her get close, not when everything felt so broken, so shattered. Please, just talk to me, she whispered. I know I've messed up. I know I've hurt you, but I didn't want to. I never wanted to hurt you. Her voice was soft, full of emotion, but it didn't change anything. The damage had already been done. The trust we had built for years had crumbled in an instant, and no apology could fix that. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I wanted to scream, to ask her how long this had been going on, how she could betray me like this. But instead, I found myself asking the question that had been lingering in the back of my mind since that day I followed her. How long? She flinched, her face paling. What? How long has this been going on, Sarah? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. With him, Jason. How long have you been seeing him? She looked away, her hands trembling at her sides. I could see the tears welling up in her eyes, but I didn't feel any sympathy. It wasn't that I didn't care, but my heart was too heavy, too full of betrayal, to feel anything else. I don't know, she said, her voice breaking. It wasn't supposed to happen. I didn't mean for any of this to spiral out of control. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could keep it hidden. Her words hit me like a punch in the gut. She thought she could keep it hidden? Keep it from me? After everything we'd shared, after all these years? I've been a fool, she continued, her voice shaking. I'm so sorry, but I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to make it right. I shook my head, not trusting myself to speak. There was nothing she could say that would fix this. Nothing she could do to erase the way I was feeling, the deep ache in my chest that threatened to swallow me whole. For the first time in what felt like forever, I realized that I couldn't stay. Not with the lies, not with the secret she had been keeping from me. This wasn't just about Jason anymore. It was about everything she had taken from us. I need some space, Sarah, I said, my voice low. I need to think. She opened her mouth to say something, but I didn't let her. I turned and walked away, not looking back, not wanting to see the guilt on her face anymore. I needed to get away, to clear my head, because I didn't know what to do next. I didn't know where to go. My mind was a mess of confusion and anger, but I knew I couldn't stay in that house any longer. I couldn't stay in the same space where everything felt tainted. I grabbed my coat, walked out the door, and drove. I didn't have a destination in mind. I just needed to get away. The roads were empty, and the night air was cold as I sped down unfamiliar streets. It felt like the world had paused, and I was the only one moving, trapped in my thoughts. The memories of everything, our life together, the love we once shared, flashed before me, but they felt distant now, like they belonged to someone else, someone who didn't exist anymore. I kept driving until the city lights faded, replaced by darkness. I found a quiet spot by a lake, parked the car, and got out. The sound of the water was the only thing I could focus on. I leaned against the hood of the car, staring into the blackness, feeling utterly alone. I thought about Sarah, about how we used to talk, laugh, share everything with each other. How did it come to this? How did we get so far off course? I could barely recognize the woman I had married and the woman who stood in front of me just hours ago. It was as though a stranger had taken her place. And Jason, I couldn't stop thinking about him. The way he looked at her, the way she smiled at him. It made me sick to my stomach. What was his role in all of this? Was he just some guy she turned to when things with us became too difficult? Or was there more to it? How long had they been seeing each other behind my back? I couldn't answer those questions, and the uncertainty was driving me mad. After what felt like hours, I finally started the car and drove back. But as I pulled into the driveway, I knew I wasn't ready to face her. Not yet. Not when I had so many questions and no answers. I sat in the car for a few minutes, trying to find the strength to face the reality of what was happening. The woman I loved, the life we built together, everything was falling apart, and I didn't know how to put it back together. I walked into the house, but Sarah wasn't there. She must have gone somewhere, maybe to clear her head too. I sank into the couch, exhausted, and waited. I didn't know what I was waiting for. Maybe for some sign that things could go back to normal, that the woman I once knew was still in there somewhere. But deep down, I knew that wasn't going to happen. Not anymore. Time seemed to stand still as I sat on the couch, trapped in my own thoughts. Every minute stretched on, heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. The house, once familiar and comforting, now felt alien. The photos on the walls, the little mementos of our life together, mocked me. I couldn't escape the memories, the laughter, the love, all of it now overshadowed by betrayal. Hours passed, but it felt like days. I hadn't moved. I just stayed there, waiting for something, anything, to break the suffocating silence. My mind kept running in circles, each thought more tangled than the last, until I heard the door open softly. Sarah had returned. I didn't look up. I didn't need to. Her footsteps were cautious, almost hesitant, like she wasn't sure if I'd even acknowledge her presence. The tension between us was palpable, and it felt like there was an invisible wall separating us. She stopped just inside the door, unsure of what to do, and I could feel her eyes on me. Then she spoke, her voice quiet but desperate. "I'm sorry." Her apology hung in the air, and I couldn't bring myself to respond right away. The words didn't feel like enough, like they could ever be enough. She stood there, waiting for me to say something, but I couldn't. My throat tightened, and I knew that anything I said wouldn't change the truth. Nothing could fix what had happened. She stepped closer, sitting down next to me on the couch. "Please, talk to me. Tell me what you're feeling." I turned to face her, but it took a moment for the words to come. "I don't even know what to say anymore," I said, my voice low. "I can't pretend like nothing's wrong. I can't just brush this under the rug." Her face fell, and I saw the pain in her eyes. "I never meant for this to happen," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never wanted to hurt you. But it didn't matter anymore. The damage was done." "You did," I said softly. "You hurt me, and I don't know how to come back from that." She put her hand on mine, but I pulled it away, not wanting her touch. "I know I've messed up," she said, tears welling up in her eyes. "But I swear, I'll do anything to make it right." I shook my head. "I don't know if you can. I don't know if I can ever trust you again." Her face crumpled, and I could see the tears falling, but I couldn't find it in me to comfort her. The distance between us felt too vast now, and I wasn't sure I could ever cross it again. "I don't think I can forgive you," I said quietly, the weight of the words crushing me. "Not right now. Maybe not ever." She collapsed beside me, sobbing quietly, and all I could do was sit there, numb, because no matter how much she apologized, no matter how many times she told me how sorry she was, the truth was that everything had changed. The house felt more like a prison than ever. Sarah's sobs echoed through the quiet, but I didn't know what to do. I wanted to reach out, to comfort her, but I couldn't bring myself to. Every time I thought about the betrayal, the image of her with Jason, everything I had believed in just crumbled. I wasn't sure how to handle the woman sitting next to me, the one who had once been my whole world. She leaned against me, her head resting on my shoulder, but I remained stiff, distant. It wasn't because I didn't care. On the contrary, it was because I cared too much. The tenderness between us had been replaced by a coldness I couldn't shake. I couldn't just pretend like everything would be okay. I couldn't make the hurt go away. I don't know if I can live with this, I said, my voice raw. I don't know if I can keep pretending. She shifted, lifting her head to look at me. Her face was blotchy from crying, her eyes red and swollen. But there was a desperation in her eyes, an urgency that made my stomach churn. I never meant to hurt you, she repeated, her voice cracking. I know I messed up, but I never wanted to lose you. I looked at her, studying her face. For a moment, I wondered if she was telling the truth, or if this was just another layer of the mask she'd worn for months, maybe longer. How could I ever know? How could I ever trust her again? You've already lost me, I whispered, barely believing the words as they left my mouth. The weight of them hit me harder than I expected, and I almost regretted saying it. But it was true. The woman I had trusted, the one I had loved, was gone. In her place was a stranger I couldn't recognize. Her lips trembled. I'll do anything, she said, her voice pleading. Please, give me a chance. I'll prove to you I can fix this. I shook my head slowly. Prove it? How? How can you prove something like that? She stayed silent for a moment, and when she spoke again, it was almost a whisper. I'll stay. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. But the truth was, I didn't want her to stay, not right now. I didn't want to see her every day, to keep pretending we could fix this when I knew deep down that there was no fixing it. The foundation we had built together had cracked wide open, and I wasn't sure how to put the pieces back. I need time, I said, my voice hoarse. I need time to think, to figure out what comes next. She nodded, tears still streaming down her face, but she didn't argue. For once, I could see that she understood. The distance between us wasn't just physical anymore. It was emotional, and it would take more than just words to bridge it. The days that followed were a blur. Time seemed to slow down, stretching every second into an eternity. I kept to myself, moving through the motions of daily life without ever really living in it. I'd wake up, go through the motions at work, come home to an empty house, and try to sleep in a bed that now felt too big, too cold. Every corner of the house reminded me of Sarah, of us, of everything that was no longer there. Sarah gave me the space I asked for. She barely spoke to me. When we did talk, it was surface level, small words, fleeting conversations, nothing that touched the heart of what was happening. She'd offer apologies here and there, but the words had begun to lose their meaning. I didn't know if she even understood what I was feeling, or if she was just trying to salvage whatever was left of us. I found myself thinking more and more about Jason, about the way he looked at Sarah, the way she responded to him. It wasn't just a fleeting attraction. It was something deeper, something more real than I had ever imagined. The jealousy, the anger, they burned inside me, but I couldn't bring myself to confront him. Not yet. It wasn't just him that I was angry at. It was everything. It was the lies, the deceit, the way Sarah had turned away from me, and I was too lost in the anger to face him. One night, after another long, cold day, I found myself staring at the phone in my hand. I had been meaning to call someone, anyone, just to get some perspective, but I kept putting it off. Then, I saw Sarah's name pop up on the screen. I hesitated before answering, unsure of what I wanted from this conversation. But when I finally did pick up, I realized I wasn't ready for the conversation at all. Hi, she said, her voice tentative, unsure. Can we talk? I didn't respond immediately. The air in my lungs felt thick. What was there to talk about? What could she possibly say that would make any difference? I think it's time, she added, her voice breaking slightly, to figure out what happens next. I can't keep living like this, and I don't think you can either. I wasn't sure if I was ready for that kind of conversation. The end of US, whatever that looked like, wasn't something I had even begun to process. But I couldn't deny that something had to change. I had to make a decision, and I had to make it soon. I'll be home in an hour, I said finally. We can talk then. I drove home that night with the weight of the world on my shoulders. The silence in the car was deafening. I had been avoiding this conversation for days, but now it was inevitable. Whatever came next, I knew it would change everything. When I walked through the door, I saw Sarah sitting in the living room. She looked the same, tired, worn out, but there was something different about her tonight. Something that made her seem smaller, more fragile than I had ever seen her before. Her eyes were red from crying, and she looked up at me, waiting. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say. The words that had been bouncing around in my mind for days didn't seem to matter anymore. The truth was, I had no idea what to say. I had no idea what to do. "I'm sorry," she whispered, breaking the silence. "For everything. I know I don't deserve it, but I need you to know how deeply sorry I am for what I've done. I never meant for it to go this far." I didn't say anything right away. I just stood there, looking at her. The woman I loved, the woman who had betrayed me, was sitting in front of me, pleading for forgiveness. But how could I forgive her? How could I ever look at her the same way again? "I can't fix this," I finally said, my voice heavy. "I can't just forget what's happened, Sarah. I can't pretend like everything is going to be okay." She nodded slowly, as if she had already known this answer. She wiped at her eyes, trying to stop the tears, but they kept coming. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy for her, but it was overshadowed by the anger and betrayal I felt. It wasn't enough. Nothing would be enough to take away the hurt. "We've changed," I said, my voice faltering. "We can't go back to what we were. I don't think we can. I don't know how we ever could." She stood up then, taking a step toward me, but I couldn't bring myself to reach for her. The distance between us felt too great. The trust was gone, and no amount of words could repair it. "I understand," she whispered, almost too softly to hear. "I just want you to know that I never stopped loving you. I lost myself along the way." I stood there, looking at her, feeling the weight of everything we had been through. I loved her too, but love wasn't enough anymore. It wasn't enough to erase the lies or to make things right. "I think it's time we both move on," I said, my voice low. It was the hardest thing I'd ever said, but it was the truth. We couldn't keep holding on to something that was broken beyond repair. With one last look at her, I walked out of the room. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew this was the end of us. And as much as it hurt, I also knew it was the only way for both of us to heal.